بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. So this is our seventh day, the seventh moment in the Prophet's biography. This is more, as we said, we have 10 classes or 10 moments in the Prophet ﷺ, 10 turning points in his life. And we looked at 6 days so far. The first day we called it the day of arbitration, to reflect the specific quality of the Prophet ﷺ. And the second day we called it the day of revelation. The third day we called it the day of persecution. The fourth day was the day of Al-Aqaba. And the fifth day was the day of Hamza. And last week we looked at the day of, what was it? Al-Hudaybiyah. Today is the seventh day, or the seventh, we call it the seventh day, or the seventh moment in the Prophet's time. Today's episode is to do with Fathu Makkah. People would often translate this as the conquest of Makkah. I'd rather call it the liberation of Makkah. Makkah was somehow colonized by the disbelieving Makkans. We will see in a minute how this, took shape in this particular moment. From last week, we've seen how the vast majority of the companions were not really happy with the terms of the agreement that the Prophet ﷺ had with the people of Makkah. They thought this was really unfair to the Muslim community, who are powerful enough to really, take over Makkah now. Why should we go back to Medina? Blah blah blah. We covered this last week. There was one of the phrases, one of the clauses of this agreement. There was one clause. Now we have two parties, the Prophet's party and the Meccan's party. One of the clauses of this agreement, if there is a tribe that wants to align itself with either party, they do have the freedom to do that. This was a part of the Al-Hudaybiyah treaty. So there was a tribe with the name of Banu Bakr, which aligned itself with the Meccans. And a tribe called Banu Khuza'ah that aligned themselves with the Prophet ﷺ. This alignment simply means that if they get attacked, the Prophet is meant to really help and support. And the same thing with the Meccans. So only, and that's one of the clauses. Another clause was this: this treaty was meant to be respected for 10 years. It's a 10-year pact. Only after 2 years of this pact, Banu Bakr, these people that aligned themselves with the Meccans. In pre-Islamic times, they did have they had some sort of a really strong and a big fight with the Banu Khuza'ah. And Banu Khuza'ah, defeated them in one of those raids. And now this is, 30, 40 years after this. But they still remember this. So with this, they had those sort of underlying motives that prompted them to attack Banu Khuza'ah at, one of the fountains that they had, like a watering place. So they attacked them, and they killed so many of them. And they kept pushing them back till they reached Mecca. So Banu Khuza'ah thought if they would really seek refuge in Mecca, in Al-Bayt al-Haram, Banu Bakr would respect this. They didn't. They came into Mecca. Bayt al-Haram, and he actually continued killing them. One of them said to the other, by way of reminder that this is a sacred place, you don't fight here. He said, Al-Yawma qad asabna ta'arana. This is the day of revenge. If we don't really take advantage of this, there is no way we get our revenge back, the one that we really owe them almost 40 or 50 years ago. One person survived. So he quickly went to the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, asking for his support. And a long poem, he spoke in poetry. Like, he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he composed a wonderful poem. We didn't have the time to really cover this, but he came to the Prophet ﷺ in the masjid. And in this poem, he explains what happened. The Prophet ﷺ immediately said, "Nusirta ya Amr ibn Salim." You've already been given support. The thing is, the Quraysh people, the Meccans, have given some hidden support to Banu Bakr. So they have given them weapons, they have given them men as well. One of those guys was the guy who was, remember last week, the man who had this negotiation with the Prophet ﷺ and his son came in, Suhail ibn Amr, was one of the people that actually in disguise and secretly supported those people. So they had no excuse. But the leader of Quraysh, Abu Sufyan, did not take part of this. He was not even aware of it. So he quickly came to Medina, asking the Prophet ﷺ, again to continue this treaty and to renew the treaty basically. His daughter, Habiba, not many people know that she was one of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, and actually one of the earliest comers to Islam. She actually migrated from Mecca to Abyssinia, not even Medina. She's very early on. So he first came to her house and he wanted to sit down. Ibn Hisham tells us that فلما ذهب أبو سفيان ليجلس على الفراش طوته عنه. So he wanted to sit down on one of the carpets. She actually took it away. She took the carpet away from her father. He said, ما أدري يا بنيتي أرغبت بي عن هذا الفراش أم رغبت به عني. I'm not entirely sure whether you really meant that this carpet is too good for me to sit on it, or that I'm too good for it. She said, إنه فراش رسول الله وأنت بعض من المشركين. She said, this is the Prophet's carpet. I will not allow you to sit on it because you're not really clean yet. So Abu Sufyan, went, before he talked to the Prophet ﷺ, he tried to talk to Ali, to Umar, to Abu Bakr. Everyone is saying that the Prophet is adamant to really go to Mecca this time and support Banu Khuza'ah. So Abu Sufyan's attempts to really do something did not really succeed. So it's so many things had happened in the middle. We're not going to really focus much on the details, just taking the key lessons. The Prophet ﷺ, those people were killed. Banu Bakr were attacked. Banu Khuza'ah in Sha'ban, the month of Sha'ban. 2 years after Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, that means we're talking about the 8th year in the Prophet's time in Medina. In Ramadan, the Prophet ﷺ started to move from Medina to Mecca. That's an immediate action. With him, he had 10,000 people who wanted to support the Prophet ﷺ. the Meccans, the Prophet ﷺ tried to hide this movement as much as he could because he does not really want to fight. Again, there's not because they got to know they would prepare themselves for a war, and that, which is not the Prophet, which is not really what he wants. The Prophet ﷺ moved from Medina, from Mecca, and now we are on the outskirts of Mecca. Abu Sufyan at this point yet had not really seen how powerful the Prophet ﷺ was and how powerful his army was. He had some good relation with the Prophet's uncle, that is Al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib. So Al-Abbas took him to see how powerful the army was. Every time the Prophet ﷺ divided this army into small groups or small bands, carrying banners. Each band would have its own banner. So Abu Sufyan never seen this before. And at some point, he said to the Prophet's uncle, he said to Al-Abbas, لقد أصبح لابن أخيك اليوم ملكا عظيما. Remember Abu Sufyan will become a Muslim after that. But he said, you know what? Your nephew now has an amazing and an unbelievable authority with this army. He's more of a king rather than. Al-Abbas said, إنه ليس بملك إنها النبوة. This is not like a kingdom. It's a prophethood. Abu Sufyan at this point says, فنعم إذا. Even so, says, I don't care about the titles. What I see in front of me is someone who is so powerful. This is an important point because it will reflect. Abu Sufyan is the head of Banu Umayyah. This will reflect much on how in the history of Muslims after that. We will get to this in a minute. Until Abu Sufyan, again, saw the group that had the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet has divided the whole army into different groups, and he was with one of those groups. Until there was a moment when Abu Sufyan met the Prophet ﷺ, again on the outskirts of Makkah. They had a conversation, and the Prophet ﷺ, had this conversation with Abu Sufyan whether he would be, interested in becoming a Muslim. Abu Sufyan, after seeing this, reluctantly accepted Islam. It took him time to really be settled in his faith. Even when the Prophet ﷺ asked him if he accepts him as a prophet, he said, مَا زَالَ فِي النَّفْسِ مِنْهَا شَيْءٍ. It is still not really fully sure. Then Al-Abbas said, can't you see what is in front of you? Then he said, I become a Muslim. But again, we know from history that he was not, it took him time for this faith to deeply resonate. So now the leader of Makkah has accepted Islam. And he wanted, the Prophet ﷺ, by way of honoring him as well, he told him, go and tell the people of Makkah, من دخل دار أبي سفيان فهو آمن. Whoever seeks refuge in Abu Sufyan's house, he will be safe. The people said to him, your house can't suffice, can't accommodate that large number of people. And he said, وَمَنْ دَخَلَ بَيْتَهُ فَهُوَ آمِنٌ. Whoever enters his own house and just locks it up, he will be safe. وَمَنْ دَخَلَ الْكَعْبَةَ فَهُوَ آمِنٌ. Whoever gets around the Kaaba, he will be safe. In the midst of all this, a man with the name of Sa'd ibn Ubadah was leading one of those groups that came with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was, he got carried away by the strength of the Muslim army. That he said, "Al-yawma yawmul malhama." Today is the day when we will slaughter the Meccans for what they have done to us. Remember this, when we covered the day of Aqaba, the fourth day, when the Prophet ﷺ was, forming relationships with the Medinans. When the Meccans got to know that some alliances are being formed, and the Medinans went back to Medina, the Meccans sent after them, and they captured two of those guys. One of those guys was Sa'd ibn Ubadah. So he himself had a difficult time in Mecca, so he still has this memory. So this is the day when we really get our revenge again. اليوم يوم الملحمة اليوم تستحل الكعبة. This is the day when there is no sacredness. We will destroy those people. No sacred space in it. Right? اليوم أذل الله قريشا. Today Allah is really humiliating the people of Quraysh. Abu Sufyan came to the Prophet ﷺ and says, "Have you heard what Sa'd is saying?" The Prophet was not really happy with this. But he went to Sa'd and he said, actually today is the day of mercy. اليوم أعظم الله الكعبة وأعز قريش. Today Allah is honoring the Kaaba, and He is, He's actually honoring the people of Mecca, and you will see what is going to happen. And then this man Sa'd ibn Ubadah was leading his group. The Prophet ﷺ took the banner from him and he gave it to his son. His son was a wise man, was not like a war monk. So we see now how we have two different responses. Abu Sufyan and Sa'd ibn Ubadah responded in this way. Now the Prophet ﷺ got into Mecca. When he got into Mecca, he had behind him, on the same mount, people will imagine, again, the Prophet is coming to the people in many new ways here. Behind him on his mount, you would expect Ali ibn Abi Talib to be behind him, Abu Bakr, Umar, these big names. He actually had Usama ibn Zayd. Usama ibn Zayd was so beloved to the Prophet ﷺ, but he was a nobody with the Mecca, because he came as a slave somehow. Right? So he was behind the Prophet ﷺ on the mount. So people could see. Now there is, Mecca is not being reformed only in terms of idol worshiping, but also in terms of ethics and social classes, blah blah blah. So Usama ibn Zayd was behind the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet is asking Bilal, again another black Abyssinian, was a foreigner, to climb on the Kaaba and read and do that. So the Prophet ﷺ is shocking the imagination of the Meccans in so many ways. Right? People were astonished that the Prophet had Usama behind them, because it meant something. That within those days, one of the ladies stole another lady, right? There is a punishment to theft in Islam. Because she came from a noble family, they thought if we could really go and talk to the Prophet ﷺ, it could be sorted out, and this woman, because she comes from a noble family, she wouldn't get punished. They thought of one person to talk to the Prophet ﷺ. They kept thinking, who to talk to the Prophet? They thought the one who came behind the Prophet when he was entering Mecca, that is Usama ibn Zayd. That's how they linked things. That's how they thought that Usama must be very important. Can't you really intercede? Can't you really talk to the Prophet? That Usama actually did. At this point, the Prophet ﷺ said, by way of telling Usama off, Tashfa'u fi hadd min hududillah. How could you intercede in something that Allah has legislated, Allah has, one of Allah's laws, And he said, لو أن فاطمة بنت محمد سرقت لقطعت يدها. He said, even if it was my own daughter, she would have been punished. I do not really distinguish between people as to this. That's another scene that is so significant for us here. Another man, again, seeing the Prophet ﷺ in this massive army that nobody had seen before. But Abu Sufyan himself recognized that I've never seen an army like this. Right? By this time, by the way, Khalid ibn Walid himself had accepted Islam. So he's leading actually one of the groups. This is the point when a man was so frightened. He came, because he happened to be in front of the Prophet ﷺ, he came to talk to the Prophet ﷺ, and he was shivering because of the scene. In this point, the Prophet ﷺ said, هون عليك, take it easy. إنما أنا ابن امرأة كانت تأكل القليل بمكة. Take it easy. I am no one but the son of a woman who had nothing to eat. In old days in Mecca, she would eat dried food, or dried meat, which, I know dried meat today is often seen as a luxury thing. Back in the days it wasn't seen as such. Or some commentators say it meant actually dried bread. The point is, take it easy. I'm nobody, but the son of a woman who had nothing to eat, who could barely eat, who barely had something to eat. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ, when he entered Mecca, commentators tell us that he always kept his head down, that his own beard would touch his mouth, and he was reciting Surah Al-Fatih. The surah that nobody understood what was it, because it was revealed 2 years earlier, talking about the conquest of Mecca. And the Prophet would recite this chapter, Surah Al-Fatih. So the Prophet ﷺ came, entered Mecca. Now, I'm really trying to summarize because it's a huge scene here. He comes into Mecca and he gives a wonderful khutbah that again establishes the key foundations of Islam, reminding the people, they all had, come from the same origin, males, females. Allah is the one who made them into nations and tribes so that they may come to recognize each other. And this is the point when he, in Eid al-Adha, we often begin Eid al-Adha with these prayers. Nasr Abdahu wa Azza Jundahu wa Hazam al-Ahzab. That's actually the prayer that he had said in this very point. Nasr Abdahu. He supported and gave victory to his, and he chooses this very word, Abdahu, his servant or his worshipper. Wa Azza Jundahu, and supported his soldiers. Wa Hazam al-Ahzab wahdahu, and he is the one that had really defeated his enemies. I've just been a tool, but he is the one that has done that. That's his humility, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. فَلَا شَيْءَ بَعْدَهُ. We have done nothing. It's all his tawfiq, it's all Allah's support. Right? Again, a long khutbah. We don't have the time to cover the khutbah. It's worthy of coverage in of itself on its own. Then he comes and asks for the key to enter into the Kaaba itself. To give you an idea, the Kaaba, because it was very much respected, there were 3 jobs that the tribes would look after when it comes to the Kaaba. There is something called al-hijaba. Hijaba comes from hijab, means the coverage of the Kaaba. And the people will be in charge of the key of the Kaaba, looking after who gets into it, organizing things, covering the Kaaba. And then you have as-siqaya. Siqaya is to tasqiyya, to give drinks to people, right? And then you have al-rifada, is to provide food, or rifada, to provide food for the people, for the poor pilgrims who don't have much support, don't have much, to eat or so. Tribes, somehow Siqaya has for long been in the responsibility of Banu Hashim. Al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib comes up as a prominent name here. And the man who was in this particular moment in charge of the hijab, or having the key of the Kaaba, was called Uthman ibn Talha. He was by this time was very advanced in his age. But there was an incident that had happened before the Prophet ﷺ moved from Mecca to Medina. Actually, the Prophet asked him for that key to enter the Kaaba, but he actually, despised the Prophet ﷺ. Who are you to get into the Kaaba from the inside? At this particular moment, the persecution had reached its peak, so he actually just disregarded the Prophet's request. At this point, the Prophet ﷺ had said to him, كيف بك إذا أعطيتني هذا المفتاح أضعه حيث شئت. Could you imagine, what about a day in which you will be giving me this key and I will be the one who tells you where to put it? This day had come. When the Prophet ﷺ asked for the key, he opened the Kaaba. Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was from Banu Hashim, said to the Prophet ﷺ, Ya Rasulullah, ijma' lana siqayata ma'a al-hijab. Get us, now that we have the key, get us to be in charge of the as-siqaya plus al-hijab, to be in charge of offering drinks to the pilgrims, but also to be in charge of the key of the Kaaba. The Prophet ﷺ took the key from Ali ibn Abi Talib, returned it back to Uthman ibn Talha, and he said, Al-yawma yawmu birrin wa wafa. Today is the day of bir and wafa. Bir means, it's a really comprehensive word, it means righteousness, return the trust to its people, the day of trust, the day of amana. Then he said, خُذْهَا يا عثمان خالدة تالدة. This is for you, for good. You be in charge of this key. لا ينزعها منكم إلا ظالم. Whoever takes it away from you is, nobody will do that but an oppressor or a wrongdoer. Right? At this point, the Prophet ﷺ, the verse was revealed according to some commentators. The verse in Surah An-Nisa, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تُؤَدُّوا الْأَمَانَاتِ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهَا. Allah commands you to return the trusts back to its people. Right? The last scene probably is when the Prophet ﷺ had all the people in an amazing scene, and he asked them, مَا تَظُنُّونَ أَنِّي فَاعِلٌ بِكُمْ. What do you think, and the Meccans more particularly, what do you think I do to you today? He said, خَيْرًا أَخٌ كَرِيمٌ وَابْنُ أَخٍ كَرِيمٌ. We have nothing bad to expect of you and from you. You are a generous and noble brother, and the son of a noble, comes from a noble family. The Prophet ﷺ teaches us a lesson for history. لا تثريب عليكم اليوم. I'm not even blaming you. There is no blame today. لا تثريب عليكم اليوم. اذهبوا فأنتم طلقاء. They said, لا أقول إلا كما قال يوسف. I have nothing to say but what Prophet Yusuf had said to his brothers in Egypt. No blame on you today. اذهبوا فأنتم طلقاء. Go, you are released. Again, so much can be read into this. This scene had never been seen in humanity's history. um, someone's program of reformation or reform comes into completion in front of his own eyes, and he is not really into revenge. In a culture of revenge, we've just seen what Banu Bakr have done to Banu Khuza'ah in Mecca, in Al-Bayt al-Haram, the house they respect. And you have someone of justice. We'll see perhaps next week when the Prophet ﷺ started, people started to come to Islam in multitudes because people, Bukhari tells us, كانت العرب تلوموا بإسلامهم والفتح. People would say, let's see what the Meccans will do. If they accept Islam, we will. If they don't, it's at stake. We don't know what's going to happen. When they accepted Islam, Mecca became a Muslim place. People started to come to Islam in huge numbers. That's literally the embodiment of Surah Al-Nasr. وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. You've seen people coming to Islam individually, now they come in multitude. أفواجا. فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ وَاسْتَغْفِرْهُ إِنَّهُ كَانَ تَوَّابًا. After that, we would see a man who came before his tribe, and accepted Islam. The moment he accepted Islam, the Prophet ﷺ said to him, there is a huge herd of sheep in between two mountains, like in a valley. Go and take them. So the man went and took all that herd, and he went to his people, and he said, "Inna Muhammadan yu'ti ata'a man la yakhsha al-faqr." That Muhammad, gives away to people. That's in a way that makes you feel that he is never afraid of poverty. He gives away everything. And he said to the Prophet ﷺ, "Wallahi, لا تجود بهذا إلا نفس نبي. لا يجود بهذا إلا نفس نبي." It's only the soul of a prophet that would do this. Otherwise, we ourselves would have shuh nafs, stinginess, and this and that. So this is exactly what the Prophet ﷺ had. When the companions last week were somehow, reluctant to go back to Medina, seeing this being unfair to Muslims, blah blah blah. And you see, only 2 years later, Mecca is liberated from the disbelievers of Mecca. And one of the key scenes, obviously, is that they had 360 idols in the Kaaba. All have been destroyed. Another, reflection of the change of culture. Time is chasing us, but this is simply the key moment, the key scenes from today's theme, Yawm al-Fath. But as we do every time with Alam al-Afkar, ideas or principles, and then we have persons, and we have objects or things. It's time for us to really try and allocate. Do you have any objects that, or perhaps begin with ideas, any ideas that stand out out of this whole thing? What comes to your mind? Yes, yes.
Integrity, no matter what.
Integrity, no matter what. How is that?
The story of when I think Usama was told to go ask the Prophet about to forgive someone just because of their status.
Absolutely.
Would integrity be the right word? Or?
Yes, integrity is definitely part of it. Integrity is literally being affiliated with ideas, with principles, with values, not with people. So it is definitely a significant part of it, yes. And I could see the same thing. Yeah, I leave that to the conversation. But yes, that definitely stands out. Yes, yeah.
الوفاء. I can't find the English word.
وفاء. Loyalty. In terms of what?
وفاء, the person would be Uthman ibn Talha,
Uh-huh.
and the object would be the key of the Kaaba.
So it would be, yeah,
Trust.
you're right. The word wafa, perhaps standing by promises, maybe, yeah, keeping promises, keeping trust, even more so. And the object is the key. Yes, absolutely. Now, again, at the time, Ali thinks this is our day. They have no, I mean, Ali's argument is very valid, but the Prophet ﷺ is saying values transcend these things. Yes, sir.
Mercy. I think very clear one from, especially from the quote. Today is the day of mercy.
Absolutely,
that summarizes the whole thing to me.
That's actually the word the Prophet ﷺ chose for this. Today is the day of mercy. And here we'll actually see how the Prophet ﷺ moves a day from a day of revenge. Someone who's coming from the mentality of revenge, so no, it's nothing to do with this, nothing to do with that. It's to do with rahmah. Absolutely. How?
I was going to say mercy. Probably the banner would be the object.
With that, the banner is indeed the object. Any other ideas?
Maybe discipline of the army.
Wonderful, discipline. Right, Sa'd ibn Ubadah is a leader. The Prophet could have just ignored. Maybe this man has been hurt back in the days, so I just forgive. So no, you're a leader. This is under my name, and I can't let this go. And he actually gave it to his son, Qais. And this is a very, the Prophet ﷺ is fully aware of how historical this moment was. Mistakes that will be ignored today will be there for good. What do you think? Tawakkul.
When the man says that the Prophet ﷺ doesn't fear poverty from the amount of stuff he gives away.
The Prophet is tawakkul, yeah. Absolutely. Sayyid al-Tawakkilin, he is, definitely. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Indeed. Any other thoughts? I could think of, humility. I'm actually struck the most by the Prophet's humility. Coming into Makkah, bowing his head down. I don't think anyone had seen victory in history in the way the Prophet ﷺ had seen. And yet he just denies himself. He denies himself. He says, Nasr Abdahu, he is the one who supported his own servant. Azza Jundahu, he is the one who supported his soldiers. Wazam al-Ahzaba, he is the one who defeated the parties and the armies. Wahdahu, him alone, him and him alone. فلا شيء بعده, there is no one after him. That's complete denial of oneself. At a time when, if you have 1% of this victory would just, it's me. The man coming and saying, shivering in front of him, says, no, I know where I came from. I remember. At some point, I had don't be really taken aback by this army and this dominance. And to say this, in the midst of all this, إِنَّمَا أَنَا بِمْرَأَةٍ كَانَتْ تَأْكُلُ الْحَدِيدَ. people often quote this hadith, but they don't really know when it was said. It was said in this particular moment in history. That even adds, this hadith in of itself is very inspiring. But the context is even more inspiring. To say this in the midst of you, in the height of your power, in the height of in the peak of your strength. You know what? I am nothing but the son of a woman who barely had something to eat. Wow. What else? What other thoughts may come to mind? The Prophet written, the sense of equality in Mecca as a society was very hierarchies in everything, and as sources of pride, and the Prophet gets Usama behind him. Usama, he's not really from Mecca, his father came as a slave, asking Bilal to stand at the Kaaba. That, people in the minute talked about it in a negative way, as in, look at him. A black Ethiopian slave standing on top of the Kaaba. And then the verse was read, you all came from the same origin. Sense of equality, that's a big hit to the Meccan society. What else? Yes, yeah.
Religious freedom. اذهبوا فأنتم الطلقاء. The Prophet ﷺ not requiring belief in him to stay in Mecca as opposed to the way that he was treated.
Absolutely. Letting people go free. اذهبوا فأنتم الطلقاء. As opposed to asking them to convert.
Yes. Just having to stay in your house.
Absolutely. Persons who stands out here? I think too many today. The Prophet himself. Abu Sufyan. By the way, the Prophet's journey was so difficult. There was, in the midst of this, there was another man, not to be confused with this Abu Sufyan. His name is Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith. He was the Prophet's direct cousin. But he was one of the Prophet's fiercest opponents. That he, when he saw the Prophet coming with his army, he hid himself out of embarrassment. Because he is the Prophet's cousin, and he's been siding with the Meccans. And then he approached Al-Abbas and said, what should I do in this case? The Prophet said to him, Al-Abbas said to him, go to the Prophet and say to him what Yusuf's brothers had said to Yusuf. What did they say? تَاللَّهِ لَقَدْ آثَرَكَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا وَإِن كُنَّا لَخَاطِئِينَ. So the man did what he was told. He went to the Prophet and he said, تَاللَّهِ لَقَدْ آثَرَكَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا. Allah must have privileged you over us, and we were mistaken. The Prophet responded saying, لا تثريب عليكم اليوم, no blame. You're fine. That's another Abu Sufyan al-Harith, the Prophet's direct cousin. Yes.
I was going to say, sorry for
Yeah.
ideas. Forgiveness in time of power or in time of ability. العفو على المقدرة. As in, Rasul Sallallahu did not forgive people in Mecca when he was getting killed, but in the state in which he could have just literally.
Absolutely. You forgive when you are powerful already. Definitely. Yes, yeah.
Can I ask a bit of a question here?
Sure.
Why is it like, for example, Abu Sufyan and the Talha ibn Uthman, why we mentioned this thing about equality and giving people who are lower in the community these positions and stuff like that. Why does he really honor Abu Sufyan and why and Talha and Hamza?
In the Islamic and Arab tradition, there is this the tradition that says "Akrimu aziza qawmin dhul." Honor leaders who have been humiliated, who have been dragged, or who have lost their positions or something. At this point, Abu Sufyan actually, Abu Sufyan was not the one who breached the treaty. He actually admonished. He kept asking who is behind this, who supported Banu Bakr, who had done this, who had done. He was not happy with it himself, and he accepted Islam before the Prophet came into Mecca. So he was reasonable and wise enough to really understand the situation. So the Prophet wanted to really honor him because he is his people's leader. So he wanted to maintain this image of him. Just protecting his image. Yeah.
If this has to do with the khayrukum fil jahiliyyah, khayrukum fil Islam, is there any relation to this incident?
Yes, could definitely be related, even though this is more linked to Umar ibn Khattab. As Abu Sufyan was like in the middle, as in, if you think of Umar as being gold, then Abu Sufyan would be silver, so to speak. Speaking of people's, ma'adin al-nas, the natures. And yet, Abu Sufyan, his son Muawiyah, would become the first leader of the Umayyad caliphate system that would come later. Much can be said about this. Yes.
I see it as a matter of wisdom / diplomacy. In that the Rasul ﷺ is prioritizing some ethics on that day, and others will come later on. As in, for example, Bilal being, for example, put forward. That's one ethic that the Prophet really prioritized on that day. While, for example, completely breaking away Abu Sufyan's hierarchy in Quraysh is something that is later to come down the line, rather than completely shocking people. I find it as a way in which the Prophet was diplomatically reforming the mentality of Quraysh, in that he didn't shock them in all their articles of faith, but some, and then to later on allow for that.
I see where you're coming from. But the way I look at it is that the Prophet ﷺ, because we know from the tradition that Abu Sufyan had this side to his personality. He said, "Inna Abu Sufyan rajulun yuhibbul fakhr." That Abu Sufyan likes to be particularized, likes to be seen as a distinct person. Right? I find it hard to accept that the Prophet ﷺ was going gradual in this case, because he actually destroyed the idols, which were even more important than Abu Sufyan himself, to the people's minds. So to grab the 360 idols and smash them, who was Abu Sufyan compared to all this? So, but Abu Sufyan had this nature, this characteristic, he moved to Medina after that and lived in Medina with the Prophet ﷺ. And there was one time when he wanted to meet the Prophet ﷺ, but the Prophet had a meeting with other people. And it was so busy. But people lined up in front of the Prophet's room, if it was a room. And it was multiple people. Abu Sufyan was one of them. Abu Sufyan was, he didn't feel good about it. Like, how could you? Like, he just remembered how influential he was, and he said, "How could you let me wait all this?" When he came to the Prophet's house, the Prophet's home, Abu Sufyan said, "Ma kita ta'dhanu li hatta kita ta'dhanu bi hijarati Makkah." You were almost Imam Muslim allowed everyone to come to your place, even stones would come to your place, but you wouldn't allow me to come in. The Prophet said, Ya Abu Sufyan, كل الصيد في جوف الفرا. What he meant, that's an ancient proverb. What it means, what it means is simply, this can take ages to explain. What it means, like, because how influential you are, if people can see that I have made you wait, other people will naturally wait. So that's the Prophet is turning the whole. Which one was so happy? I'm still. So the Prophet understands people's personalities as well. So there is this side to his character, Allahu A'lam. But that's a good photo. Any other persons? I mean, of course, Habiba. We know very little of her, as in we don't often talk about her. She is her daughter, his daughter. Accepted Islam very early on when it was tough to accept Islam. Not only did she accept it, she moved from Mecca to Abyssinia. And this is the way she treats her father. You know, that he said, I don't know whether I'm too good for the carpet, or the carpet is too good for me. That's how she meant that the carpet is too good. In one of the narrations, he's reported to have said, "Allah laqad ghayyaraka ad-dahr." You've changed. This is not how we were. Habiba, her name is Ramla, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, Bilal stands out. Usama. Any objects that you may think of? Yes. Idols. Yes, absolutely. You know, the story of the idols in the Quran tells us that they began with meanings. Like, I think people, made statues for righteous people, according to Surah Nuh. These names were names of righteous people, but with the passage of time, when people lost the meaning of these characters, they worshipped them. They thought these would be worshipped. Malik bin Nabi, the one who is behind this threefold typology, actually has a really interesting statement. He says, كلما غاب المعنى ظهر الصنم. Every time the meaning disappears, the idol appears. This is literally the story behind the idols. So always try to draw meanings out of things. That's what we're trying to do. The idol could be a person, by the way. The idol not just can be a person, someone that you believe in, who you trust, or blah blah blah. So make sure that you're always after meaning rather than objects as such. So the idols, we've seen the key, the banner.
The Kaaba, you can
The
say
Kaaba
that.
itself, indeed. The fact that Banu Bakr could invade the Kaaba and kill the people inside the Kaaba, that's unbelievable.
Abu Sufyan's house.
Abu Sufyan's house, indeed.
The carpet.
The carpet. Yes. Yeah. These things carried meanings. To Habiba, the carpet meant something. I'm not sure you can really sit on this because it means something. Being alert to those meanings. The sister's side, any thoughts, any ideas? You're most welcome. You don't have to, but yeah, it's for you to know you're welcome. perhaps the horse or the Prophet was riding. Usama behind him. His head, how he bowed down. Salah ad-Din, when he entered Jerusalem, did the same thing. Absolutely. Because subhanAllah, with Salah ad-Din, prior to him, so many people attempted to liberate Bayt al-Maqdis. Ahmad ad-Din Zanki, Nuruddin Mahmud, his own father, Salah ad-Din's father, but Allah opened for him. Allah had distinguished him with this honor. So he knows, I'm the culmination of a journey that really started long ago with these people. So it's not me alone. It's this lineage. Yes.
That sentence about كلما غاب المعنى ظهر السمع
No.
is strikingly prominent in all aspects of our life. Even in the way that we treat religion, in that we hold on sometimes to things that might have held a meaning at some point, but they don't hold the meaning the same.
Yes.
But we still hold on to them.
Absolutely.
Something that was a mark of arrogance back in the day is not a mark of arrogance now, but we hold on to them.
Absolutely. SubhanAllah. Any other thoughts? Okay. That brings us to the end of this moment. So next week we meet with the 8th moment in the Prophet's journey. Let's see what we will have with this. By the way, I'm skipping a lot of Seerah. I do realize this. I'm skipping a lot. Just maybe the major themes that leave us with some good lessons here. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك. Thank you so much.